In a small room on the second floor of a house tucked away in a quiet alley, Mr. Hugo Martinez, at the age of 74, sat silently by the window. The harsh sunlight pierced through the thin curtain, casting pale streaks of light across the worn wooden floor. He sat there, wordless, his gaunt hand resting lightly on the chair's arm. The wrinkles on his hands, every line and crease, told stories of a life once filled with strength and passion, now as silent as the room around him. His eyes, clouded by time, followed the cars speeding back and forth on the street below. The city's sounds rose up, mingling with the honking horns and hurried footsteps. Yet, to Hugo, it all felt like a blurred mess, dim and distant, as if happening in a world he no longer belonged to. He no longer recognized himself in the hustle and bustle. Everything seemed to move too quickly, beyond his ability to grasp. The laughter and chatter of young people passing by, the music from the cafe at the end of the street, even the birds gliding across the sky, all were brimming with the vitality he once had. But now they seemed like distant memories. That feeling, as though life was quietly leaving him behind, left an emptiness in his heart, a void that nothing could fill. Hugo had once been a proud man. In his youth, he steered his life with unwavering determination, never bowing to hardship, working tirelessly from dawn till dusk on his small farm. He knew that independence and willpower were all he needed to build a fulfilling life. He built his wooden house with his own hands, planted lush green rows of vegetables, and cared for his animals as if they were part of his family. But time spares no one. Those proud and vigorous days are now just faint memories. The vast fields he once walked tirelessly now exist only in his mind. These days, each step down the stairs requires him to grip the railing tightly, his legs trembling as though they no longer belong to him. Once, while carrying a glass of water upstairs, he nearly collapsed on the old staircase, leaving him wondering how much weaker he had become. His hands, which once nurtured every plant and flower in his small garden, could no longer muster the strength to open a stubborn jar. He recalled early mornings, when dewdrops still clung to the leaves, picking vegetables and tilling the soil. It wasn't just work, it was joy, purpose. But now, those hands could barely steady a porcelain cup as he sipped his morning tea. What weighed on him most was his heart, a heart once filled with love and dreams, once hopeful for a bright future with his wife, children, and simple aspirations, now felt heavy and burdened. It was a pain not easily described. It wasn't sadness over aging, nor was it the loneliness that permeated his small room. It was the feeling of being a burden, a weight to those he loved most and always wanted to protect. Every time he saw Mateo, his son, rushing out the door to work, he couldn't help but blame himself. Mateo already had enough pressures in life, his job, his family, and his unfinished plans. And Hugo, he felt, was just another responsibility Mateo couldn't escape. Clara, his daughter-in-law, always smiled when she brought meals to his room, but that smile sometimes broke his heart. He saw the fatigue hidden in her eyes, the effort she made to ensure he didn't feel abandoned. Those feelings, like an unrelenting undercurrent, wrapped around his mind every day. Hugo, a man who once did everything for himself, now found himself confined to a reality he couldn't accept. He needed others, but he hated that feeling, and it made his heart grow heavier with each passing day, as though every beat carried a painful reminder that time would never turn back. Hugo lived with his son Mateo and daughter-in-law Clara in a small house tucked away in a quiet alley, where everything, from the trees to the gravel path, exuded a serene appearance. Mateo, a technology engineer, often had his eyes glued to a computer screen or complex design plans. His work demanded not only focus but seemingly unlimited hours. Clara, Hugo's daughter-in-law, was a cheerful preschool teacher with bright eyes and a warm smile. But she was no less busy, juggling energetic children and countless daily tasks. Although Mateo and Clara cared deeply for Hugo, their love was often overshadowed by the busyness and pressures of their lives. Hugo could feel it in the everyday moments, the hurried greetings each morning, or the dinners where conversation was reduced to a few brief exchanges. Every morning, Mateo and Clara left the house in their crisp, professional attire. The sound of their hurried footsteps echoed down the stairs, blending with the clatter of briefcases and their voices reminding each other of the day's tasks. They never forgot to say, "Take care of yourself, Dad," before stepping out the door. Yet the hurried tone in their words made Hugo feel it was more a habit than genuine concern. And when the door closed, the house fell into silence, broken only by the ticking clock that reminded him of the long, lonely hours ahead. Hugo often sat at the dining table, staring at the breakfast Clara had prepared. The meal was neatly arranged, but no one was there to share it with him. He ate slowly, savoring each small bite, knowing there was nothing else to look forward to afterward. Each afternoon, when he heard the sound of keys turning in the lock, he felt a faint sense of relief. But soon Mateo or Clara would walk in, their faces tired, exchanging only a few words of greeting before retreating to their own tasks. Hugo knew that Mateo and Clara didn't intentionally distance themselves from him. He was certain they loved him, but he also understood that love, no matter how great, had its limits. Those limits lay in time, patience, and the energy they could spare for him when they were already grappling with their own pressures. At times, in brief moments, Mateo would pause beside him and ask, "Do you need anything, Dad?" Or Clara would place a hand on his shoulder and say, "Get some rest, Dad." But those gestures rarely lasted, swallowed by the busy rhythm of life that neither could escape. In such moments, Hugo didn't blame his son or daughter-in-law. He understood they weren't trying to make him feel abandoned, but that understanding didn't lessen the sadness in his heart. Instead, it deepened his pain, because he felt not only like a burden, but also powerless to change that. And so, with each passing day, the sense of isolation and detachment became more pronounced in his life. Hugo's life hadn't always been this way. There were days when he would wake to the sound of birdsong and sunlight streaming through the windows of his small wooden house in San Antonio. That house was where he and Elena, his late wife, had built a life filled with laughter and happiness. Elena, with her long, lustrous hair and smiling eyes, had been the center of all the joy in Hugo's life. "You know," she once said on a spring morning as they sat on their porch, "this house isn't just a place to live. It's where we belong, where it all begins." Hugo remembered that clearly, for it was Elena's love that had turned the simple wooden house into a true home. Before meeting Elena, Hugo didn't know what it felt like to be a father. Pablo, Elena's young son from a previous marriage, had come into his life like an unexpected gift. From the moment Pablo first called him Dad, Hugo vowed to love and protect the boy as his own, and he kept that promise without hesitation. Hugo spent most of his time tending the garden, where he planted lush rows of vegetables, and caring for Max, his loyal horse. Max was a strong horse, always by his side, whether pulling carts or helping with farm chores. Hugo often joked with Elena, "If I get tired, Max will take over for me." But fate didn't grant him and Elena more time together. One winter night, a power outage plunged their home into darkness. Hugo lit a candle to brighten the living room. After a long day working in the garden, he sat down on the sofa, quickly drifting into sleep. But when he awoke, the air was thick with smoke. The fire, sparked by the candle, spread faster than Hugo could react. He tried to save what he could, but neighbors pulled him out of the house before it collapsed. When the flames finally subsided, the house was nothing but ashes. Elena had passed away years earlier, but now, even the memories of her, the photographs and all they had built together, were gone. The house, once a place they belonged to, was now a dark void in his memories. Now, in the small room at Mateo and Clara's house, memories of the home in San Antonio haunted Hugo every night. He often sat by the bed, holding the only surviving photograph of Elena. In the picture, Elena stood next to Max, her radiant smile lighting up her face as she held a basket of ripe red tomatoes. "Elena," he whispered, "I'm sorry for letting things end up this way." But life didn't stop, and he knew he had to go on. Still, Hugo couldn't shake the feeling that he was a burden to his son. Mateo and Clara had enough on their plates, and he didn't want to add to their struggles. One day, when the guilt became unbearable, he said to Mateo, "Son, take me to a nursing home, sell the land in San Antonio, and use the money to pay the fees. I don't want to be a burden to you and Clara." Mateo looked at him, his tired eyes betraying his exhaustion. "Dad, not now. We'll talk about this later." But Hugo knew those words were only a delay, postponing the inevitable. In the days following Hugo's suggestion, the atmosphere in the house grew heavier. Mateo and Clara continued their routines, but Hugo noticed the avoidance in his son's eyes. Clara sometimes hesitated at his door, as if she wanted to say something, but she would only leave behind a strained smile before hurrying away. Hugo didn't blame them. He understood that their lives were already too busy, and having an aging father to care for only made things harder. At night, when the house fell silent, he sat alone at the small table. Elena's photo was always within his sight. He remembered the feeling from years ago, when the small house in San Antonio was filled with laughter and the aroma of Elena's cooking. Now, every meal was delivered by Rosa, with a touch of pity hidden behind her kind words. This year, Hugo's birthday was quieter than ever. That morning, Clara left early, leaving a card on the table with a few words, "Happy birthday, Dad. We'll be home early tonight." Mateo also didn't linger longer than a quick, simple birthday wish. Rosa stopped by at noon with a small cake. "At least there should be something to make today feel special," she said, setting the cake on the table. Despite her good intentions, the emptiness still lingered in the room. Hugo took the fork, cutting the cake into small pieces, but he couldn't taste the sweetness. Each bite felt like a reminder that he was celebrating another year, alone. In the evening, as he had expected, Mateo and Clara returned home late. "Sorry, Dad. Today was so hectic," Mateo said as he walked through the door. Clara nodded in agreement, adding, "Have you eaten dinner? I'll make it up to you tomorrow." Hugo managed a weak smile. He didn't reproach them, but his heart ached deeply. Birthdays, once a time for togetherness and sharing, had become nothing more than a faint marker in his children's busy schedules. That night, after Mateo and Clara had gone to bed, Hugo sat quietly in the darkness. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting a soft glow on Elena's photo on the table. He picked up the picture, gazing into her smiling eyes, and whispered, "I don't belong here anymore. Elena, I'm just a burden." The next morning, he decided he could no longer remain silent. As Mateo came down the stairs, Hugo waited for him in the living room. "Mateo," he began, his voice low but resolute, "I've thought about this carefully. Take me to a nursing home, sell the land in San Antonio, use the money to take care of me. It's better this way for all of us." Mateo froze, clearly taken aback by the determination in Hugo's voice. "Dad, it doesn't have to be like this. We just need more time to adjust." But Hugo shook his head, his voice heavy with emotion. "I don't have time to wait. Mateo, I don't want to spend my last days feeling like I'm not needed." Mateo sighed, placing a hand on his father's shoulder. "We'll talk about this later. Dad, I'm really tired right now." And, as before, Hugo's words were once again dismissed. In the weeks that followed, Hugo didn't bring up his request again, but the loneliness within him grew. He stopped talking much with Mateo and Clara. His meals were still brought by Rosa, but even she began to worry about his unusual silence. "Mr. Hugo, you shouldn't lock yourself away like this," Rosa said one day, her voice tinged with concern. But Hugo only smiled, a smile that left Rosa at a loss for words. He knew he was waiting for something, not a change from Mateo or Clara, but a decision from within himself. One bright Saturday morning, sunlight streamed through the windows as Mateo walked into Hugo's room with an unusual smile on his face. In his hands was a neatly pressed white shirt and a folded set of clothes. Clara followed behind, carrying a small suitcase. "Dad, get ready. We're going somewhere today," Mateo said, his tone steady but slightly enigmatic. Hugo looked at them in surprise. "Where are we going?" he asked, half thinking that Matteo had finally agreed to his request. "You'll see soon," Matteo replied, his face unreadable. Hugo didn't ask further. He bent down, carefully folded a few essentials, and placed them into the suitcase. Before zipping it up, he picked up the photo of Elena, gently placing it on top, as if bidding a quiet farewell. The car rolled out of the city, carrying Hugo's heavy thoughts along with it. In the oddly quiet atmosphere, only the steady hum of the engine filled the air. Hugo sat in the back, his eyes absent-mindedly gazing out of the window. He clutched the small suitcase tightly, as if afraid of losing the last remnants of his memories. Matteo was focused on the road, his expression calm but unreadable. Clara, seated in the passenger seat, occasionally smiled lightly at something outside the window. That smile, seemingly carefree, weighed heavily on Hugo's heart. How could they be so composed? He wondered, while he believed he was being taken to the end of his journey. The scenery outside began to change. The towering buildings of Austin gave way to tranquil country roads. On either side of the road, lush green trees stretched out, interspersed with small wooden houses nestled behind white fences. Every passing image played like a slow-motion reel in Hugo's mind, stirring old memories. Hugo remembered afternoons spent with Elena, driving their old car down similar country roads. Elena, her radiant smile and hair fluttering in the wind, would often glance at him and ask, "How do you think we'll grow old together?" Hugo? And he, back then, would laugh heartily, replying, "As long as you're with me, I'm not afraid of anything." Now, without Elena, those memories only deepened his sorrow. He also recalled the first time Pablo toddled into his arms, laughing gleefully, a laugh as bright as sunlight streaming into their small home. Hugo remembered the garden in their backyard, where he had tirelessly worked with Max, his loyal horse, to cultivate lush green vegetable rows. Hugo sighed, his eyes following the trees retreating into the distance. Those images belonged to a distant past. The house, the garden, and Max. Everything had been consumed by a merciless fire. The car continued its journey, now traversing narrower gravel roads. Hugo realized they had left behind all traces of the city. The surroundings grew quieter, with only the rustling leaves accompanying the gentle breeze. He began to feel uneasy. "Matteo," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion, "where are we going?" Matteo didn't turn, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "You'll find out soon, Dad," he replied, his tone gentle but cryptic. The answer didn't ease Hugo's anxiety. He glanced at Clara, hoping she might offer some clarity, but she only gave him a soft smile, as if everything was unfolding as planned. Hugo's heart started to race. He looked out of the window, but all he saw were endless fields and dense green forests. There was no sign of houses or any human presence. The path grew narrower and bumpier, as if they were heading deep into an isolated place. "Matteo, please don't do this to me," Hugo said, trying to keep his voice steady but unable to hide its trembling. "If this is the nursing home, I won't hold it against you. Just tell me." Matteo was silent for a few moments, as if deciding whether to respond. Then, with a calm tone, he said, "Dad, this isn't a nursing home. Trust me." The car eventually slowed down, then turned onto a small gravel path. Hugo felt the vehicle lightly jolt as its wheels rolled over the uneven surface. Through the windshield, he could see an open space emerging ahead. Matteo parked the car, his voice firm yet gentle as he announced, "We're here." Hugo sat still, his eyes fixed on what lay before him. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. In front of him wasn't the cold, gray, impersonal building of a nursing home he had dreaded. Instead, it was a house he never thought he'd see again. It was his old home in San Antonio, but it wasn't the pile of ashes he had last seen. The house stood there, strong and intact, just as it had been in his memories. Its fresh white paint gleamed in the sunlight. The windows sparkled, and the wide porch was bathed in warmth. Everything was so perfect that Hugo felt as though he were dreaming. Mateo stepped out of the car and walked around to open the door for Hugo. The elderly man sat frozen, his trembling hands resting on his lap, unable to believe his eyes. Before him stood the familiar house, a place he thought had been buried forever in the ashes of memory, now restored and more beautiful than ever. "Mateo, what is this? What's happening?" His voice cracked, barely escaping his throat. Emotions surged within him, a mixture of surprise, disbelief, and a touch of hesitation. Mateo smiled, his eyes shining with emotion. "Dad, Clara and I spent months working on this for you. This is your house, rebuilt from the ground up. We know how much it means to you, and we wanted you to have a place where you feel you belong." As Hugo listened, a flood of questions filled his mind. For so long, he had thought Mateo was growing distant from him, yet it turned out that the rush days, the hectic schedules, and the silence he couldn't understand had been hiding a labor of love. He hadn't realized that, amidst all the busyness, Mateo had quietly rebuilt the house he thought was lost forever. Hugo stepped out of the car, his legs trembling as if they could no longer support him. Clara approached gently, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder and offering a warm smile. "Dad, the whole neighborhood helped us. They missed you and wanted you to come back. This isn't just your house. It's a place where everyone is waiting to welcome you." Clara's words were like a balm, soothing the deep-seated sorrow in Hugo's heart. He gazed at the house, taking in every familiar yet renewed detail. Tears began streaming down his weathered face, warm against his skin. He couldn't find the words to speak. All he could do was stand and take in the sight of the home before him. His mind flooded with memories, the happy days with Elena, Pablo's laughter, and Max's silhouette racing through the garden. Those memories blended with the reality before him, creating a moment so vivid and filled with love that it felt like life was breathing new energy into him. Hugo took slow, deliberate steps up the porch, feeling the warmth of the wooden planks beneath his feet. The wooden door creaked open gently, revealing a space bathed in light. Everything seemed to have been infused with the spirit of his past years, yet carried a freshness and wholeness he hadn't dared to imagine. The house hadn't just been rebuilt, it had been improved, yet retained its cherished familiarity. Above the fireplace hung a framed photo of Elena, her smile illuminating the room. On the table sat a simple vase filled with the flowers Elena had once loved. Hugo touched each object, each wall, as if needing to confirm that it was all real. "Dad, this is your home," Mateo said, his voice thick with emotion yet steady with certainty. "We never wanted to take you anywhere else. This is where you belong." Hugo looked at his son, then around the house once more. His heart swelled with emotion. He hadn't just regained a house, he had regained a sense of purpose, of being loved and valued. The dark thoughts of being a burden melted away, dissipating like morning mist under the sun's warmth. Tears continued to stream down his face, but these were tears of joy and profound gratitude. He whispered, as if speaking to himself, or perhaps to Elena, "Thank you. Thank you for not giving up on me." Mateo stepped forward and embraced his father's frail shoulders. "You gave everything to us. Dad, you sacrificed your life to give us a home. This is just a small way for us to give back what you deserve." Hugo nodded gently, feeling his heart filled for the first time in years with a quiet, simple, yet overwhelming happiness. Hugo and Mateo's story is a testament to how family love can overcome misunderstandings and hardships. What we do for our loved ones is not merely out of duty, but a way of showing how much they mean to us. What do you think of Mateo's decision? Would you do the same for your parents? Thank you for sharing this deeply moving journey with Hugo and Mateo. If this story has touched your heart, evoking reflections on family, love, and sacrifice, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your stories or perspectives. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel to help us reach our milestone of 1,000 subscribers. Your support is not only a tremendous encouragement, but also allows us to continue sharing meaningful stories about kindness and connection. Together, Let's build a community where love and compassion thrive, offering moments of pause in our fast-paced lives. See you in the next video.